Have you reached that unnerving stretch of your twin flame path where every sign suddenly goes mute? No angel numbers, no prophetic dreams, only the hollow echo of your own questions. You wonder if he has finished his trials, if his soul has finally stirred awake, or if destiny has somehow slipped through your fingers. Worst of all, no one warned you that the greatest test might arrive without fireworks, hidden in the hush, disguised as loss, demanding the death of every protective mask you ever built. In the next few minutes, we will guide you straight into the heart of this silence. You'll learn why the universe withdraws its usual confirmations right before the breakthrough, how to recognize the subtle pulse beneath the quiet, and what practical shifts will keep you anchored when every external sign vanishes. Together, we will decode this final exam, reveal the energetic checkpoints your divine masculine is navigating, and show you how to transmute anxiety into sovereign calm. Watch through to the end, and the hush that once felt like abandonment will become your greatest revelation. You'll step away with a blueprint for reading the language of stillness, a deeper trust in your own wholeness, and a challenge to embody such unwavering presence that he and the entire world can't help but feel the magnetic call of your truth. Ready to turn silence into power? Then, settle in and let's begin. Number 1. The death of the false self. There comes a crucible on every soul-lit path when what disintegrates is not the body, but the armor it once mistook for identity. The carefully rehearsed poses of competence, the reflexive maneuvers of control, and the tough-skinned bravado learned in boyhood all begin to quake and fracture. What protected him through storm and scarcity now feels too heavy to carry another step. In this initiation, collapse is not a cosmic punishment, it is a sacred undoing, an invitation to breathe without the suffocating mask of performance. The myths that once defined masculine strength, invincibility, certainty, dominance, or strategic disappearance slowly reveal themselves as bars on a prison gate. Each illusion he releases widens the doorway to genuine presence, yet ripping off those layers can feel like surrendering skin. He may interpret the tremor as failure, yet spirit calls it freedom. The moment power rooted in avoidance alchemizes into power anchored in truth. Your role in this unraveling is not to chase the fragments or glue them back into place. The question has never been whether he loves you. His soul recognized yours long before language drew breath between you. The true question is whether he can stand beside you stripped of ego, meeting love with the unguarded openness it requires. To do so, he must taste the wild air of his own essence, raw, undefended, tender enough to feel everything yet strong enough to stay. Honor this death the way you would honor dawn breaking over the ruins of night. As each false layer drops, hold space rather than expectation, presence rather than prescription. For when the masks finally shatter on the floor of becoming, the man who rises will not offer you a scripted performance, but the rarest gift in all the worlds, himself, unarmored, awake, and ready to love from the marrow of truth. If you've made it this far, pause for a moment and let this truth settle into your spirit. The death of the false self is not just his journey, it is all of ours. Each of us, in some way, has worn masks to survive, to be accepted, to be loved. But what happens when we're finally called to lay them down? How does it feel to be met, not for what we present, but for who we truly are? We invite you to reflect on a time when you felt the pull to shed a layer of yourself and what that transformation revealed. Share your story in the comments, or simply affirm your own becoming by typing, "I choose truth over illusion." Your presence and your voice may be the mirror someone else needs today. Number 2, the unraveling. To the untrained eye, his journey may appear as emotional chaos, an erratic dance between tenderness and withdrawal, presence and silence. One day, He shows up as the man you remember, the one whose gaze melts walls and touches your soul with unspoken knowing. The next, he vanishes into the distance, armored, cold, and unreachable. But what looks like betrayal is not rejection. It is implosion. Within him, everything he thought made him strong is collapsing. The inner scaffolding he built in childhood, praised as resilience but rooted in survival, is now crumbling beneath the weight of truth. The stoicism once admired has become a suffocating mask, and as it falls, he faces a grief he can no longer outrun. He grieves not just the loss of false strength, but the absence of emotional tools never taught. How to speak the language of vulnerability, how to feel without fear, how to stand open without shrinking. Your love, steady and illuminating, becomes both his sanctuary and his mirror. It reflects not only the beauty of his soul, but also the wounds he has spent a lifetime concealing. To a heart conditioned to stay hidden, this kind of visibility can feel like annihilation. This is the sacred unraveling. It is not a punishment, it is a rite of passage. Layer by layer, illusion is stripped away, his addiction to control, his reliance on external approval, his fear of emotional intensity. All of it must fall. What remains, once the dust settles, is the quiet birth of something real. Presence that does not perform, vulnerability that does not seek validation, love that no longer hides. It is messy, painful, and profoundly sacred. And though he may not yet know it, every unraveling is bringing him closer to becoming the man his soul always longed to be. Number 3. It's sacred dismantling. True strength is not found in running or resisting, but in the rare courage to remain rooted in truth, even when every nerve in the body begs for escape. His old self may reach for familiar armor, withdrawal, anger, silence, anything to protect the illusions that once kept him safe. But real transformation requires him to stand in the fire of his own awakening, unshielded, exposed, and willing to feel what he spent a lifetime avoiding. This is the sacred dismantling. Not a fall from grace, but the beginning of it. And your role is not to follow him into the dark corners of his undoing. You are not meant to shrink, to match his fear, or to lose yourself in his emotional weather. You're not the rescuer or the reformer. You're the lighthouse, steadfast, radiant, and unmovable. Not chasing, not pleading, not dimming your brilliance to soothe his resistance, but simply being, anchored in clarity, alive in your light, devoted not to him, but to your own soul. Your stillness, your embodiment, your unwavering truth becomes the silent invitation that speaks louder than any demand. This is what alignment looks like. By holding your ground, you show him what it means to choose soul over survival, to rise rather than retreat. You do not fix him, you free him, not by force, but by example. You show that choosing integrity, wholeness, and self-honoring is not only possible, it is the only path that leads home. In doing so, you remind him of the man he could be, not through pressure, but through presence. And if he dares to follow, it is not because you waited, it is because you led. Number 4, your presence as catalyst. Your very being carries a quiet electricity, a living, intuitive field that asks nothing, yet strips away every pretense he once relied on. Without a single demand, the warmth of your gaze and the steadiness of your breath invite him into a space where emotional maturity is not a lecture, but a living demonstration. In your radiance, he meets honesty, unflinching, and softness, unafraid. Both were qualities he once admired from a distance, yet feared to embody himself. Now, they hover inches from his guarded heart, refusing to be ignored. Each moment beside you is a mirror that does not merely show love. It reveals the steep price of staying unprepared to receive it. He sees the richness of connection available in your presence, and by contrast, the hollowness of his defenses. What once felt like impenetrable armor suddenly resembles brittle glass. Every subtle contraction, the withheld truth, the half-closed heart, the silent retreat, glints sharply in newly awakened awareness. Your energy makes tangible the cost of clinging to safety at the expense of intimacy. Thus, the muse becomes the catalyst. You are not here to soothe him back to sleep, nor to validate the stories that keep him small. You are here to rouse the part of him that remembers why he chose this lifetime, to feel fully, to love bravely, to live in truth. Your presence sounds the bell of awakening, clear, resonant, impossible to unhear. If he answers, it will be by his own free will. If he resists, the echo will follow him until he is ready. Either way, your role is fulfilled not by convincing or rescuing, but by remaining luminously, unapologetically alive. In doing so, you become the living proof that real freedom begins where performance ends, and that love, when met with readiness, holds the power to remake a soul from the inside out. Number 5. Facing grief and resistance. The path of awakening rarely begins with joy, it often opens with grief. For many divine masculines, the moment love stops being a fantasy and becomes truth, a quiet panic begins. What once felt intoxicating becomes confronting. The tools that once helped him survive, charm, avoidance, half-truths, no longer hold power in your presence. They disintegrate in the face of your clarity, and this loss feels like death to a man who once relied on masks to feel safe. This grief is not just for you, it is ancient and personal. It is the ache of the inner child who was taught he was too much or not enough. It is the sting of unspoken failures, of roles performed but never lived. It is the soul's yearning for intimacy that collides with a lifetime of fearing what it might reveal. When you offer love that is real, unwavering, transparent, without manipulation, he does not feel victorious. He feels exposed. And exposure, to a man conditioned to protect at all costs, feels unbearable. So he may retreat, not because your love was wrong, but because it was too right to endure without inner readiness. If he pulls away, it is not evidence of your failure, nor a confirmation of loss. It is the mirror doing its sacred work. You have not lost him, you have simply revealed him to himself. And that unveiling, though painful, is the first step toward genuine transformation. You are not here to shame him, to fix him, or to wait in silence hoping he returns unchanged. You are here to hold the frequency of truth so clearly that anything unhealed is lovingly, unavoidably called forward. This is not rejection, it is refinement. It is the soul's invitation to purification, where nothing hidden can remain if union is to be real. Only when the masks fall, when the wounds are named, and when the man chooses wholeness over hiding, can sacred partnership begin. Until then, your light remains the compass, not the cure. If you've journeyed with us to this point, pause and let these words settle into your own story. What patterns of grief, resistance, or radiant courage are stirring inside you right now? Share a moment from your path in the comments so we can learn from one another, or simply anchor the energy by typing, "I choose truth over fear." Your voice matters. Each reflection you offer becomes another light on this shared pilgrimage toward authentic love. Number 6. Sacred interventions. Sometimes the soul's curriculum is less a gentle nudge and more a jolt that shakes the scaffolding of a carefully staged life. The divine masculine may wake to find that the empire he built on certainty is suddenly trembling, an unexpected layoff that drains the bank account he once equated with worth, a partnership that dissolves despite every desperate patch, or a doctor's verdict that rewrites his future in a single breath. At first glance, these blows feel merciless, as though fate has singled him out for punishment. Yet beneath the surface, they are exquisite acts of mercy. Surgical removals of the illusions that lulled him into believing control was the same thing as safety. Each collapse dismantles a different mask. The financial fall strips away the identity that hid behind status. The broken relationship exposes the hollowness beneath performative intimacy. The health crisis peels back every layer until only the raw, beating heart remains. In the stunned hush that follows, survival noise gives way to a quieter, older voice. The voice he first heard long before he learned to bargain, impress, or conquer. It reminds him that love is not a trophy to earn, but a field to inhabit, that presence is the only real wealth, and that avoidance always exacts a hidden cost from everyone involved, especially you. Confronted with the harm his evasions have caused, he can no longer pretend the wounds are accidental. Guilt might surge, but so does recognition. You were never the antagonist of his journey. Fear was. This revelation is the hinge on which his entire trajectory turns. The question shifts from how do I win love back to how do I embody love forward. Strategies and performances lose traction. What remains is reverence for truth, accountability, and the courage to stand bare-souled in the light he once fled. If he answers this sacred summons, the rubble becomes raw material for a sturdier foundation. Where he once measured success by conquest, he now measures it by coherence with his own spirit. And from that coherence, a different kind of union becomes possible. One rooted not in borrowed narratives of control and achievement, but in the living, breathing practice of love that neither crisis nor circumstance can undo. Number 7. The quiet return. When he finally re-emerges, it won't be with grand speeches or rehearsed apologies. There may be no sweeping declarations, no promises inked in poetic words. And yet, something unmistakable has shifted. You feel it before he even speaks. A subtle yet profound difference in the way his presence lands in the room. The masks are gone. The air around him is no longer charged with performance or pretense, but with a deep, anchored stillness that speaks volumes through its silence. This return is not loud, but it is powerful. His gaze meets yours, steady and unflinching, no longer darting to avoid the weight of truth. He doesn't seek to convince or impress. He doesn't reach for you out of need, nor try to claim you as proof of his worth. Instead, he arrives with a new kind of clarity, one forged not in fantasy, but in fire, through trials that stripped him of everything false. What remains is the essence of who he is when no one is watching. You sense the difference most in his energy. It no longer pulls or pushes, it rests. There's no urgency, no grasping, no unspoken demand for validation. He isn't asking to be forgiven or rescued. He's simply showing up, fully, wholly, and without armor. He's not here to possess, but to share. Not to dominate the space, but to hold it with you. And in that, there is peace. You realize this is the return you weren't sure would ever come. Not the one your mind imagined, but the one your soul always knew. The transformation reveals itself not in his words, but in his presence. The man who once fled from intimacy now stands beside you, not as a seeker of completion, but as a co-creator of connection. He has learned that love is not claimed with promises, it is proven in presence. Imagine a man who once filled every room with noise, charming, restless, always needing to be seen, always performing. He spoke of love as if it were a script, full of grand gestures and hollow reassurances, yet his eyes never stayed long enough to meet yours without flinching. Then, life intervened. He disappeared, not with explanation, but with silence. You didn't know it at the time, but he was being dismantled by things he could no longer outrun. A failed business that shattered his identity, a broken relationship that mirrored his own emotional absence, and nights alone that stripped him down to his core. When he returned, something was different. He didn't come with flowers or poetic apologies. Instead, he stood quietly in front of you, eyes steady, voice calm, holding no expectations. He asked nothing of you, only offered his presence. And in that stillness, you felt it, the shift. He was no longer trying to possess your light, but was ready to stand beside it. He spoke little, but every word felt rooted. He didn't just say he had changed, he was the change. That is the quiet return. Not an event, but a vibration. Not a promise, but a presence. Number 8. A sacred threshold for you. There comes a moment in every sacred journey when the absence of another becomes the catalyst for your deepest presence. His silence was never meant to punish you. It was the invitation to release the version of him you had once clung to, the ideal wrapped in memory, longing, and hope. You were asked to let go, not out of defeat, but so that you could return to yourself, fully, wholly, unapologetically. It was in that empty space where answers were withheld and presence demanded that your sovereignty was born. You no longer needed proof to feel worthy. You no longer required his recognition to validate your intuition. Instead, you planted your roots in the rich soil of your own sacred knowing. This wasn't a journey of forgetting him, but of remembering yourself. You kept your heart open, not wide enough to be broken by illusions, but strong enough to stay anchored in truth. Even when logic crumbled and timelines dissolved, you chose to trust the greater unfolding. You surrendered the chase, not because you stopped loving him, but because you finally started loving yourself in the way you always wished he would. And in that divine act of devotion, something powerful shifted. You walked yourself across a threshold that few ever dare to cross. Now, you are no longer waiting at the gate. You have stepped through it. You are not waiting for a boy lost in confusion. You are ready to meet the man who has risen. A man whose return is not driven by lack or regret, but by alignment and remembrance. One who stands not to complete you, but to walk beside you, equal in devotion, steady in truth, and ready to co-create a future that begins not with fantasy, but with soul. What was once built on need has now been refined by time, fire, and sacred pause. And in that alchemy, you became the version of yourself that no longer negotiates for love, but radiates it from within. This was never about him coming back as he was. It was about you becoming who you were always meant to be, so that if he returns, it is not to reclaim the past, but to meet you where your future begins. Number 9. Inner union. There arrives a quiet turning point when the hands of the clock lose their power to haunt you. Deadlines and dates no longer whisper threats of too late, and you stop scanning the heavens for coded messages that promise his imminent return. Delay is no longer translated as a verdict on your worth. It is simply a pause in the symphony of becoming. In the hush that follows this surrender, a deeper union presses forward from within. Stillness, once feared as stagnation, opens like a hidden doorway, inviting you to rise into the fullness of your own being. You stop waiting for someone else to carry the concept of home. Instead, you embody it. Trusting divine timing becomes less a spiritual slogan and more a lived posture of faith. You breathe, receive, and allow yourself to be a vessel through which the unseen can arrange the scene. In that surrendered frequency, the divine feminine discovers her true magnetism, a resonance untouched by grasping or control. She need not chase her flame, for she has become the hearth in which it naturally longs to rest. Purpose draws nearer, peace settles deeper, and every cell remembers why it chose this journey in the first place. Meanwhile, on his side of the equation, a sacred breaking occurs. The structures that once shielded him now fracture, refining his perception and softening his heart. Every dismantled illusion serves a single purpose: to prepare him for the magnitude of what your inner preparation can finally hold. Your stillness becomes the mirror in which he can see his own readiness. Your serenity, the compass that points him toward truth. Thus, the real reunion begins long before two bodies occupy the same room. It starts the instant you choose wholeness over waiting and presence over longing. By becoming the sanctuary you once sought, you align the universe in your favor, magnetizing not only the partner your soul loves, but also the life your spirit was destined to live. We believe the journey was never truly about waiting for another to change. It was always about the sacred becoming of the self. If your heart still aches, yet holds on to hope, know that this path was never in vain. Every silent pause, every unraveling, and every sacred intervention was preparing you, not just to reunite, but to remember who you are at your core. You were not abandoned, you were being initiated, and so was he. Love that is etched into the soul does not fade with time. It deepens with presence. It isn't built through longing, but through alignment. When two souls rise not from need, but from essence, union becomes more than a destination. It becomes a vibration, a living echo of inner harmony that resonates beyond space and time. It is no longer something to chase, but something to embody. And in that embodiment, love finally meets itself, whole, ready, and real. If these words speak to your spirit, we at Spiritual Universe invite you to support this journey by liking and sharing this video. Let us spread this light together. And to anchor this message in your own becoming, leave a comment below. I am becoming, and I trust love's divine timing. Your words matter, your presence ripples, and your journey is sacred.